Hello, my name is Colin Campbell, I'm with Polygon. You're looking at Kingdom Come Deliverance. This is a game that I've been following for a few years now, and if you're familiar with it, it did a lot of business on Kickstarter, and they raised a lot of money. It's being built in Central Europe, in the Czech Republic, and they're trying to recreate the world of the early 1400s during the Hussite Wars. This is a medieval epic in every sense of the word. They're trying to create a world that would have seemed familiar to somebody living there at the time. Now, they turned up at E3 last week and they wanted to talk some more about some of the details about the game. You can see here we're going to be looking at some of the combat, which we did look at a few months ago. The combat is really kind of slightly odd in that you're using the different parts of the body to aim at and to block yourself, and it's fairly straightforward and to parry, but it definitely has a different kind of original feel to it. It'd be interesting to see how well that works, especially in a situation where there's a huge battle going on. But really what's also interesting about this is just the world. It's just wandering around and looking at the places and the people that you would have seen in 1403 in the Czech Republic, or what is now the Czech Republic. So one of the things that they wanted to talk about was weapons and armor, and you'll see here in this 10-minute video lots of little clips that they came to E3 with that show just how weapons and armor work. And it's obviously it's a very RPG feel to it. You've got these clothes that you wear that have buffs and damage numbers, and interestingly, you combine them in certain ways, so that if you're wearing like an undershirt under plate armor, that's going to give you more protection against certain weapons because it's a kind of a padding. And so like plate armor, for example, is better against swords than against maces, which you imagine being clattered with a mace, it's going to hurt on the inside. So if you've got that kind of padding underneath, that all serves as a buff. So this is a complicated game. You can't just turn up at a person selling armor and buy a piece of armor and not have to think about it again. You have to think about the armor that you wear, the way that you wear it, the enemies that you fight, and it's a game where you're having to think all the time about the way that you look to the people around you, not just the people that you're fighting, but also people that you're trying to get information from. Now, part of this game is that you'll see that there's a lot of questing, and a lot of that questing revolves around going into places, going into villages and talking to the right people and finding out the right information, and then seeing that quest through to the end and finding, for example, the runaway bandit that you need to find. And they were telling me about how one of the quests you've got to go, you can see here just while we're looking at this, you can see choosing the different part of that star is how you defend yourself and how you attack. And armor is really interesting. If this guy in front of you was naked and it had nothing on apart from that helmet, if you just hit him on the head the whole time, you wouldn't do any damage to him. Whereas if you hit him on the arm, you'd pretty much kill him immediately. So that's how the works. But going back to the quests, one of the quests is there's a bad guy. He's got a scar on his face. You don't know anything else about him. You need to track him down, and the place where he's hiding out is in a monastery, which monasteries are obviously a huge part of life in the medieval world, in medieval Europe. So you've got options here. You can either sort of charge into the monastery and kill everybody, which is generally not a good idea, especially in a game where your reputation actually matters. You can try to sneak in and try to find this guy without being seen, but again, that's difficult because monasteries are busy places. It'd be like trying to sneak into a supermarket on Saturday, so that's not a good idea. So what the demo was talking about was joining up as a monk. Your quest is to be a monk, and they're so into the kind of realism of it that during your time as a monk, you have to do monkish things. You have to learn how to pray. You have to get into the rhythm of the days of the monkish life. You also have to learn how to read, and reading is an important skill in this game, as it would have been in the medieval world. So all that gives you extra buffs and extra abilities as you go through the game. Interestingly, some of the buildings that you see in this game, the monasteries, the castles, the grander sorts of buildings, they still stand, and you can visit them today. The developers went and looked at them and they took photographs, and obviously nowadays they've got kind of roads around them and shops and houses and modern housing, but they could kind of project backwards into this world and try to figure out how these buildings would have looked 600-700 years ago, and you know they've got historians working on the team to sort of answer the questions like what kind of glass would have been in these windows, for example. I have no idea, but historians do know this stuff. What sort of hat would a woman like that be wearing as she walks around and did her daily work? What kind of work would she have done? So here we're looking at a part of the demo at E3 was to talk about armor and weapons, and you can see that you do need to look after your gear. Here is a sort of mini game where you sharpen up your sword. You don't want to misuse this machine and break the sword, but it's always a good idea to keep your knives sharpened. And also your armor, the armor does degrade over time. It will degrade if you're in a battle. You may need to go get it fixed, or you may need to get some new armor. You don't want to be picking up bits of armor that make you look like a foreigner, that make people suspicious of you. If your armor is dirty, people may think less of you as you try to get information from them. They may not think that you are as noble as you seem to be. If you go into a village and your armor is covered in blood, then you really do need to give it a bit of a wash, or stand out in the rain at least for a bit, because otherwise people are going to think that you're some sort of a savage. And of course you are some sort of a savage, in that you've got to go around and you've got to kill people in order to get what you need in order to sort of help win this war that you're fighting in. But as you can see from this game, this is a game that we have been talking about for a long time. Warhorse in the Czech Republic have been making it for a long time. They've been talking it up as this realistic simulation of medieval Europe. I mean, I personally really like the idea of this world. I like the idea of a fantasy world, so to speak. It's a fantasy in that it's very different from the world that we live in, but one that doesn't have all the usual fantasy stuff in it, like dragons and magic and potions and all this stuff. And as you can see here, as we come towards the end of this film, this is the monastery where he decided to join. And monasteries, I guess, nowadays probably don't look that much different. And interesting, you can see in these buildings some of the artwork that they've commissioned from local artists, the hand-drawn artwork, which would have been the sort of things that a monk or a nobleman would have enjoyed back in 1403. So this is a game that's coming out on Windows PC. I think next year is the official launch date. At the moment it's in early access, and obviously if you backed it on Kickstarter, you're a part of that early access and you can still get in on the action with that game. They say that it's going to be coming out on consoles at a later date. As you can see here, this is what we were talking about. You can see in my story on Polygon that we talk about this, that you can actually go into the monastery and spend time praying. I'm not entirely sure how that mechanic actually works, but there is a ton of mini games as part of this experience. They kind of laid in lots of mini games, whether that be a sort of dialogue option where you're talking to somebody, whether that be sharpening your swords, whether that be opening up locked boxes, whether that be the combat. And it's a big, complicated, rambling thing. I'm really interested to see how they get on with it. So I'll leave you now with just a few more minutes of the video where you can look at some of the RPG systems that are also ticking away underneath this game. This is Kingdom Come Deliverance.